I'm going to improvise. Yeah, I like this improvisation thing. I do these gigs 20 or 30 times a year, and, you know, people call me, professional people from associations and things call and say, we'd like for you to do a program for us in, you know, December. And I said, well, that'd be okay. We'd like for it to be about thus and so, and to last about so long. And I said, well, that'd be all right. And can you send us a bio and a photograph? I said, yeah, I think I can do that. And maybe a description of your session. And I'll say, okay, I can do that. Any correlation between that communication and what actually happens at the event is accidental. So I'm just going to improvise a little tonight. Originally, I think the idea was I was going to be here, and they said, would you make, you know, a little music at the end of dinner? And then, which is fine with me. Or later they said, and could there be a point? Music with a point. Here's a poem. I can't see it far enough to play and read it at the same time, so I'll just read it. This is called Learning to Hear. Now listen up, because our culture has lost the capacity to hear poetry. You have to listen. Learning to hear. It's 8 long years since we walked off the hot terror of the thieves that stole into my head and squatted on the side porches of my brain with their baggage of migraines, confusion, and wild spinning rides in my very own bed. Then we thought the surgery that took them and the nerve we shared was a brutal turn. The lesser of two evils, a tragic chapter in a story that had held such promise. Today, we walk the soft river trail, smell the fresh morning breath of sycamores shaking off their slumber, splashing sunlight we can taste like chilled summer Chardonnay. I watch you chatter and flit like the eastern bluebirds that have only colonized the park just this season. And I wonder how to tell you that the last echoes of the white noise of effort have finally died away, and I can hear clearly the crystalline voice that has always been in the wind. So here's a little song about improvising called My Aunt Anna. Oh, damn those answering machines, 'cause that's how I found out that my Aunt Anna finally did what we had all been talking about. When we got the message, it came as no great surprise, but where one heart attack would do most people, with Anna it took 5. Well, she would kick up her heels down on Michigan Avenue, and they would dance all night. And if ever we were doubting ourselves, Anna said that we're all right. Well, Anna was my grandma's sister, which made her a great aunt to me. Guess most folks just have 2 grandmothers, always felt like I had 3. She couldn't tell your horoscope once she read my palm. Well, something's coming up in September, and he is hardly ever wrong. Well, she would kick up her heels down on Michigan Avenue, and they would dance all night. And if ever we were doubting ourselves, Well, Anna worked at the World's Fair in Chicago and the Merchandise Mart too. And lots of guys asked Anna out. She even married two. Well, the first was a little too fond of his mother. Well, that just didn't work out. But the second one was an entrepreneur. That one knew what love was about. Well, they would kick up their heels down on Michigan Avenue, and they would dance all night. And if ever he was doubting himself, Anna made him feel alright. Well, they would kick up their heels down on Michigan Avenue, and they would dance all night. And if Anna was doubting himself, Anna made him feel alright. And Anna made him feel alright. Well, Anna knew lots of stories, 'cause she had been around. And Anna knew that life was much too wonderful to live it sitting down. And you must take some chances, she said. That's what I would tell you. 'Cause if you're too afraid of the sorrow, you'll miss the happiness too. Now I'm sure gonna miss her now that she's taken that ride. But I guess I'll always be carrying my Aunt Anna inside. Yeah, I guess I'll always be carrying my Aunt Anna inside. And she could kick up her heels down on Michigan Avenue. They would dance all night. And if ever we were doubting ourselves, Anna made us feel alright. Now we can kick up our heels down on Michigan Avenue. We can dance all night. And if ever we are doubting ourselves, Anna makes us feel alright. And Anna makes us feel alright. Thanks. Thank you. Gosh, I appreciate that. Wonderful thing about a group like this is that you can sing 2 or 3 ballads in a row and they don't kill you. So I'm probably going to do a couple of ballads for you. Now, who needs content? Does anybody here need content? Well, you're going to get some anyway. I got slides. I got an outline. I have purpose for this talk. Whether you like it or not. All right, let me sing you a song. We're going to talk in a few minutes about postmodernism, believe it or not. So let me sing you a couple of things that are really modern in outlook. Here's one. The language of culture, particularly in the last 8 or 10, 20, 30 years maybe, has found its way into 3 places in most of Western culture: music, film, and sometimes television. And thirdly, advertising. And if you want to understand mass culture, those are the places where you have to collect your artifacts. And what I want to share with you in a few minutes comes from hundreds of interviews with youngish people and lots of collecting of artifacts, a couple of which I'm going to share with you. But first, I want to remind you where we came from. Here's a very modern song. I'll tell you why it's modern in a few minutes. This one's not mine. This one was written in 1974 by Jimmy Webb. Anybody know him? See her how she flies, golden sails across the skies, close enough to touch, but careful if you try, though she looks as warm as gold. The moon's a harsh mistress, the moon can be so cold. Once the sun did shine, good Lord, it felt so fine. The moon a phantom rose o'er the mountains and the pines, and then the darkness fell. The moon's a harsh mistress, it's hard to love her well. Fell out of her eyes, fell out of her heart, fell down on my knees. I tripped and missed my part. I fell and fell alone. The moon's a harsh mistress, she's hard to call your own. The moon's a harsh mistress, the sky is made of stone. You know, it helps when you pull the right song over. Here's one more before we talk for a few minutes. This song, songs come at you for a lot of ways. Most of mine start as poems. I really feel like my first calling in the world was as a poet, so I studied chemistry. And somewhere along the line, I discovered that mediocre poems actually make pretty good songs. And I thought, I'm halfway there. So they kind of come at you different ways. This one jumped out all at once, and once in a while that happens, on a funny day. It was the day after Hurricane Charlie hit our house in Orlando. That was, I think it was 2004 in the fall, and we had 3 hurricanes come through in 6 weeks. Charlie, Francis, and Jean. Charlie was a little compact storm, a little powerful guy who came barreling through and did a ton of wind damage and then disappeared just in a few hours. And then Francis came 2 weeks later, and Francis was like the in-laws. She came and she stayed and she stayed. She lasted a long time. without a lot of rain, but just wind and wind and wind. And then Gene came, and Gene stayed and stayed as well and covered the whole state. It was a massive storm. I've got a slide from one of those satellite pictures that shows the cloud cover going from really about Moultrie, Georgia to Key West. One big circle. It's huge. And that was a lot of rain. Anyway, Charlie was the first hurricane to hit us in 37 years, and I was out of town doing a music gig a couple of days before it came, and my wife called me. I was in Birmingham, Alabama. She called and said, "I think you better come home. There's a hurricane coming." I said, "Oh, honey, they never hit Florida. It's been 37 years since a hurricane hit Central Florida. They always come up close, and then they veer off, and they hit North Carolina or Louisiana or somebody. Don't worry about it." She said, "Are you sure?" And like all men, I'm sure of everything. So I said, "Sure, I'm sure." And went off to my gig that night, got in about 1 or 2 o'clock in the morning, fell asleep, woke up about 6, checked the Weather Channel and went, "Oh no." So I called the airport and said, "I need to catch an earlier flight to Orlando." And they laughed and said, "Sir, the Orlando airport is closed." So I'm in a tiny little car, rental car, and I just jump in and start driving. And I drive south as fast as you can go. And you can go pretty fast through South Alabama and South Georgia because there's really nothing else there. And there's a 4-lane highway there that they used to call the Florida Parkway, I think it was called. It's how people from Michigan got to the southwest coast of Florida. And it's fun to drive because there's nobody there. And along the way are the bones of kitschy old tourist traps on the side of the road. Try to figure out, that must have been the world's largest grapefruit at one time, or things like that. So I'm flying. I'm doing 85, 90 in this little car, trying to get home ahead of the storm. And I can do that because all the traffic's coming the other way, for one thing. And no cops stop me. It was great. And finally got in about 6:30 or 7, and you could see the storm coming. It was like a black wall coming from Tampa. And got in the house. Jane had done everything she was supposed to do. There was water everywhere, batteries everywhere. The kids and the mother-in-law and the dogs were all in the interior hallway just waiting for the hand of doom to descend on the house. So I took the dog and a glass of whiskey and a cigar and went out the back porch. It was great because the wind was coming at this point, from the east, and our porch faces west. And it's in one of those screened enclosures over the pool. You know what those look like? You have them in Florida so you don't get carried away by the mosquitoes. And so we're sitting in that screened enclosure. You don't have mosquitoes in California, do you? Yeah. You do? Oh, okay. Well, you need a screened enclosure. That's what you need. So I'm sitting under there smoking my cigar and enjoying this glass of whiskey, and here comes the storm, and it was something to behold. I mean, unbelievable. And sure enough, about an hour and 15 minutes after things got exciting, the eye passed overhead. Everything got calm. Winds dropped down to about 15 miles an hour. We walked out in the backyard, and you could look up and see stars straight overhead. And all around us in the interior wall of the eye was lightning and these green flashes, which I later found out was some kind of electrical devices exploding. Those boxes on the telephone poles, what do they call those things? Transformers, yeah, I should know that. They explode and turn green. Very exciting. And then the back wall of the eye hits, which is much worse than the front wall. And I learned a new thing, a physics thing. Wind doesn't just go from side to side. Did you know that? Wind goes up and down. I didn't know this. It never occurred to me. Did you ever feel an updraft while you were walking around? I never did. Or a downdraft, for that matter. Suddenly, there's about 120-mile-an-hour downdraft in our backyard. And the water in the pool forms a bowl like this. And the screened enclosure just collapses like a giant stepped on it, down into the pool. The dog says, "Let's go in." And I agreed. Got up early the next morning, and we live in one of those neighborhoods with about 120 houses, but there's one way in and one way out. And all the roads are blocked by big oak trees that have blown over, probably a dozen of them. We had moved 2 or 3 years earlier from Texas to Florida, and had lived on some property in Texas. So I had manly things like chainsaws. And those wimpy Florida boys didn't have any chainsaws. I knew that. So I knew it was going to be a busy day for me when I got up early the next morning and walked the neighborhood. Went back to the front yard and drank my coffee on the front porch waiting for the sun to come up. And this little song just kind of popped out. And it came out of the thought that even though the media treat us like victims all the time, I mean, the language was that this menacing storm that had a name was malevolently bearing down on us to do us harm. Charlie threatens Central Florida. You know, Charlie has us in his sights. And all we could do was hunker down and hope for the best. And after we'd gone through the experience, I felt more like we had been on the move than the storm, that we had passed through it, I guess. And that's where this little song came from. It's called Morning Blue. If I can remember the words. In the east, nothing sad, no, not in the least. Morning dew is on my shoes. Fresh beginning, I got nothing to lose. To the morning blue. On the road now, and it's a traveling day. Destination so far away, but I like the walking and all the folks we meet. I like the talking to strangers in the street. I guess some folks were made for traveling, and the goodbyes, they never come too hard. Some nights I wonder why I'm leaving, but at daybreak I'm walking out the yard to the morning blue. Morning glow over the line, coming at me, just a matter of time. The morning breeze is in my face, makes me smile and pick up the pace to the morning blue. So smile and wave now at my back. Traveling light, nothing in my pack. And I'll remember all we said. Time and vision given up for dead to the morning blue. Time and vision given up for dead to the morning blue. Time and vision given up for dead. Now I want to read you something. Anybody in the room know what an execration text is? Ever heard that term? Do we have anybody? No? It's a archaeological kind of term. The oldest human writing that we know were on execration texts. The best they can guess, they're all shattered, by the way. They're like shards of pots. And what we're told by archaeologists, what they believe is that thousands of years ago in ancient cultures, if they were going to have a battle with the neighboring village, they would symbolically kill them ahead of time. They would paint figures on pots, little clay pots of their enemies, and then ritually shatter them and bury them in a pit. And the reason they've been preserved is that they were buried that way. They're execration texts, which I think is a cool idea. And so we tried it in a class, not to kill your enemy, but the notion of putting your deepest desire into a thing is kind of an interesting idea. And so in a creativity course I used to help teach at our college, which was one of those nonlinear, lovely courses that you can't measure very well. We had students make a thing and put themselves into it. And this is one of the hundreds of little artifacts I've collected about this generation of students. And I'll come back to that in just a minute. Listen carefully. This was written by, and I have a permission to read this to you, by Nicole. So let me read to you what was on the outside of the pot she made first. Listen closely. My name is Nicole Ray Brown. It's my movie. I make it up. I am not a number, not a potential sale, not your projected market, not your opinion, nor your puppet. You cannot measure my mind or my potential with any tool, chart, or graph. I will not change who I am or how I feel or what I believe in. I will not buy your society. I want no part of your controlling culture. Money is not as important as self-preservation. Let me say it again. Money is not as important as self-preservation. My soul is not for sale. I am happy without pills. My survival is dependent on my ability to love myself. I will always be able to look at myself in the mirror because I am not yours to measure. And then inside this pot, she had done these little origami birds, and each bird had a message on it too. And she put these things, a wonderful sort of image of spirit, that the body as vessel, spirit as sort of birds waiting to take flight that are contained in it. And she wrote these messages, among others, on those little birds, origami birds. I will follow my heart. I will set my own standards. My fears, thoughts, dreams, hopes, opinions belong to me. I will not be judged or measured by you. It's my movie. I make it up. I am a name, not a number. This, my friends, is my favorite artifact of postmodern mass culture. It's the most revealing, and that's what I want to talk with you about for just a few minutes tonight. But first, I have to sing this song for you. This one's not mine, so I have to get the words. It's like a safety net. Just in case. To listen to the words. Now, this is the most postmodern song I know. The sunset is an angel weeping, holding out a bloody sword. No matter how I squint, I cannot make out what it's pointing toward. Sometimes you feel like you live too long. The days drip slowly on the page. You find yourself pacing the cage. I've proven who I am so many times. The magnetic strips worn thin, and each time I was someone else, and everyone was taken in. Powers chatter in high places, stir up eddies in the dust of rage, and set you to pacing the cage. I never knew what you all wanted, so I gave you everything. All that I could pillage, and all the spells that I could sing. It's as if the thing is written in the constitution of the age. Sooner or later, you'll wind up pacing the cage. Sometimes the best map will not guide you. You can't see what's round the bend. Sometimes the road leads through dark places. Sometimes darkness is your friend. Today I spy a bleached out land of the coming of the outbound stage. And I'm forever pacing the cage, pacing the cage, pacing the cage, pacing the cage. Now, what I'm going to talk to you about for just a couple of minutes, all I want to do is just shake you up a little bit with something to think about. We're not going to fix anything tonight. Does anybody need to fix anything tonight? Let's not fix anything, just this once. But it's something to think about. While we think about what technology is doing for us, while we think about our institutions and their futures, while we ponder the human capital questions and all that sort of stuff, at the core of our work are people, persons, learners. And there's something going on, I suspect. Now, as I was thinking about this, walking along the cliffs today, I discovered a great truth. I'm going to share it with you, but you can't tell it to anybody else. There are two kinds of people in this world. The kind that divide the world into two kinds of people, and the kind that don't. This seemed profound at the time. I'm going to divide the world into two kinds of people for just a few minutes. And it's a helpful trope. It's not the truth. It's the truth boldly exaggerated. Right? But we have to talk in generalities to understand nearly anything, don't we? So we're going to talk in generalities. And you understand that these are broad assertions that have some use, but they're not true. You with me? Okay. And I want to argue that although the surveys that were done in 1991 and again in 1994 and then again in 2000 that led to books like Millennials Rising and Generation X and Generation Y and so on were interesting, they're really not very helpful to us. What they do is describe the surface topology of the opinion of college freshmen. That's all they do. They don't, you can't attribute it to anything. It just is the way it is. And therefore, you don't know what it means. So it sells a lot of books, though, and produces a lot of conference presentations. I want to give you a different analysis, and this is just a hypothesis, but I want you to entertain it for a few minutes. I think the generation we're serving right now, they've gotten to college just in the last few years, and they're still in the rest of the education system. Essentially, anybody who's been born since about 1980, maybe even a tad earlier, is the first generation of what I want to call truly postmodern people. Truly postmodern people. That is, they have lived their lives from birth steeped in mass culture that has the character of postmodernism. Now, and a sub-hypothesis is big ideas trickle down, but it takes time. And they don't trickle down purely. Okay? And in order to explain why I think this is true, and more importantly, why it matters to us and should matter to you, I have to spend just a few minutes in death by PowerPoint. I don't like to do this, but I think it's necessary. And what I want to do is describe a postmodern worldview sort of purely against a modern worldview, because all that postmodern is a reaction to modernism. The term appeared a couple of times in the late 19th century, but in an inchoate way. The first really coherent use of the term was in architecture, to describe a rebellion against modernism in architecture. You remember modernism? The core idea in modern architecture was form follows function. Form follows function. So we made these really efficient and hideous boxes in modern architecture. Some people think they're beautiful. Usually glass boxes, just very, very efficient things. Form was nothing, function was everything, right? Nothing was ornate, everything was uniform. You with me? And postmodern architecture was a reaction to that. And if you know anything about architecture, the rest of this talk has its expression partly in architecture. But the sort of postmodern movement in high culture began to get real traction after World War I and began to name itself after World War II, and is found in the writings of people like Foucault and Derrida and so on. You all know who they are, and I don't need to go into all that. But let me describe to you two ways of looking at the world. And again, these are a little bit overgeneralized, but here's some characteristics, just side by side. Now, those of you who are as old as I am, and some are just a little bit younger than me, we're pure modern. I mean, we have a way of looking at the world. Our speaker this morning did, and our scientist, very modern in outlook. And here's what modern means. We believe in truth. We think there's a way that the world is. It's sometimes hard for us to see it or to understand it or to put all the pieces, but we think that there's a reality that's out there, and our job is to try to figure it out. And if we were just smart enough and our tools were good enough, we would, just like Newton did. Remember the comment this morning? And if Newton had lived long enough, he might have figured out the new reality too. Remember that comment this morning? Okay. So you are alive. Good. Okay. So the idea is, the modern project was to figure out reality. And why? Because reality is full of this thing we call cause and effect. And if you can get your arms around that, you can control things. You can control reality to a certain extent. When I was 10, 12 years old, I remember watching on The Wonderful World of Color. Some of you old folks know what I'm talking about. We saw it in black and white. But The Wonderful World of Color, a show that simulated the future, way into the future, 1987 or something like that. And there was they were controlling the weather. There was a hurricane bearing down on Florida. It was a Disney thing. and these guys in the weather center who are, firing missiles with silver iodide in it or something like that, and they're controlling the weather, preventing weather disasters, okay? I can tell you from first-hand experience, we haven't gotten there yet, okay? You get the idea? The notion that if we could understand, we can control, manage, be in charge, okay? And so we believe in evidence and cause and effect and scientific method, all those kinds of things. Postmoderns don't share this point of view. A postmodern view is that there really isn't a truth out there, that you bring the truth with you. Your truth is your truth, his truth is his truth, her truth is her truth. Did you hear that this morning too? How was that expressed? It was a quote from the Talmud. Speak to me. Yes, that what we see is the world as we are, not the world as it is. Okay? And that's a postmodern, constructivist view of reality, that we make reality out of the disparate data. And everybody's reality is different. When a modern says perception is reality, what we mean is to the person perceiving it, perception might as well be reality. So you have to take that seriously. When a postmodern says perception is reality, they mean perception is reality. That's the way the world is. There is no separate reality out there. Now, there's been a lot of arguing about all this. This is one of the least important issues I want to bring to you, but it's just a way of seeing the difference. So while we're concerned with the truth, they're interested in something very different. They're not disinterested in reality. They're interested in meaning. What do things mean to me? How do I understand my place in the universe? It's my movie. How am I going to write it? You hear that? And so meaning is more important. The narrative, the story that I'm going to place myself in is what matters. So a learner with a postmodern outlook is looking for something a little different than a learner with a modern outlook. Do you ever thought about this before? I see this all the time in our classrooms. I visited a poetry classroom not that long ago. Brilliant poetry teacher on our faculty was teaching a class. This introduction to poetry is maybe week 5, week 4. So they've been learning the tools of poetic interpretation, rhyme and meter and so on. And they had them all listed on the board when I got there. And she did a wonderful thing. It's called an advanced organizer. She helped them remember what they'd already learned by having this on the board. You remember what we did, how these things work together? And I was going, She said, well, today I have a treat for you. Today, for the first time, we're actually going to interpret a poem. And she picked a poem that she loved, which is very dangerous for poetry teachers to do. And it was an E.E. Cummings poem. I forget which one it was. And she read it beautifully to the class. Only about 15 students. I'm sitting over in the corner watching all this. She reads the poem to him. And she says, so, who wants to interpret the poem? Come on now. Who wants to interpret the poem? All right, Jeremy, would you interpret the poem? Now, Jeremy's in the back corner out of the action zone. Okay? And he's all knees and elbows. And he's slumped way down, so far down you think he'll never get out of that stupid tablet desk. And he says, well, kind of pulls himself and says, to me, Prof, the poem means blah, 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 blah. Completely missed it. Clearly wasn't listening. Just made up something. I'm thinking, how's she going to handle this? Well, she's a gifted teacher. She says, well, that's an interesting interpretation. Tell us, Jeremy, how you arrived at that interpretation. He says, what do you mean? She says, how did you arrive at that interpretation? He says, you asked what it means. I told you, that's what it means to me. Now she's sort of leaning towards the board with trying to get him to make his case from evidence. She leans over there and says, yes, but using the tools, how did you arrive at your interpretation? And he starts getting mad. I didn't expect this. He says, look, you asked what it means. I told you what it means to me. It means this to me. This is what it means to me. I don't know what it means to you, and I don't care. This is what it means to me, and you can't tell me what it means to me. Very postmodern. Okay? And then she says something very modern back. She's brilliant, but modern. She says, okay, I can see you're very passionate about this poem, Jeremy. I am too, and I'm glad you feel strongly. But let me leave you with this question. If E.E. Cummins were in the room today, what would he say the poem meant? You see this? Now, the essence of modern criticism is, what was the poet's intention? How well was it executed? The essence of postmodern interpretation is every reading is different, and the meaning is constructed by the reader. You can agree or disagree with either view or both if you want, but that's just the way it is. Those were the schools. Right? Let's go to the next one. Here's some more differences. Moderns, we believe in progress, don't we? Every day, in every way, we're getting better and better. We're so much better than we were 100 years ago. In fact, there's a huge modern bias, a deep-seated and erroneous bias that says people who lived a long time ago must have been stupid, or they'd have lived now. I mean, think about all the things we can do that they couldn't do. Those idiots. And if you teach high school students in history or cultural studies or so on, you'll detect that pretty strongly. This sort of unspoken assumption that we're smarter than anybody who ever lived before us. And it's been a part of Western culture for a long time. For the better part of a century and a half, there was a dogma in the school curriculum that said until Columbus came along, everybody in the world believed the world was flat. This is patently untrue. It's never been true. There are many, many ancient texts that make it quite clear, going back to a millennium before Christ, that they understood not only that the world was spherical, but they were able to measure the circumference of the world 1,500 years before Christ to within a couple of kilometers, using nothing but a well and a stick and trigonometry. Some of you all know that story. It's a great story. So we believe in progress. What do postmoderns believe? It's on a bumper sticker. Stuff happens, or something like that. It just happens. Things just happen. Life is random. I have 4 children, and the 12-year-old uses the word random very often. Okay? And she's not quite using it correctly from my point of view, but in her postmodern mass culture, it is a basic word, random, meaning stuff happens. I'm not going to worry about why. There really isn't a why. It's not a cause and effect thing. Stuff just happens. I just got a bad grade. I can't tell you why. I just did. Stuff happens. Right? This is not an excuse. It's real. And we don't get it. It's very interesting. Moderns believe in pattern. Our brain is really made to look for patterns. Postmodern, both high culture and mass culture, is all about pastiche, just sticking stuff on there. Stuff that doesn't belong together, stuff from different styles, different eras, different schools of thought, doesn't matter. So postmodern buildings are these crazy buildings that have, the box over here and then this glass thing poking out and then classical columns on it and then maybe an awning. And you say, how did they ever put that stuff together? Postmodern. That's a way of looking at reality that says, I can put any of the pieces together any way I want to, and it's real for me. They don't have to fit according to your definitions, because it's a reaction to your definitions. Okay? Reductionism, big part of modern worldview. If we can just break things down into its component parts and put them together correctly, we can get reality right. Isn't this a good bit of what organizational theory has been about since the 1920s? The reductionism on human behavior, scientific management, isn't that a good bit of what we're still dealing with in top-down policy approaches to schooling? Reductio ad absurdum. Not what they meant to do. Postmodern is all about how the whole works. Tell me the story. How does the whole work? I want to experience the whole thing. No, 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 don't take it apart. Don't dissect it. I like the frog like he is. Okay? The whole frog. Okay? Moderns, very into rugged individualism. Now we're getting the stuff that's going to matter for us. Postmoderns, all about affiliation. They're communal. They're about tribe. Meaning and connection are at the center of their values. I want to have real relationships, and together we'll decide what things mean to us. Okay? Go ahead to the next one. Let's zip through here. Moderns question authority, postmoderns question reality. Right? Didn't you and I question authority? Some of you older guys? Didn't we? Weren't we rebels? We were bad. Okay? Except that our questioning of authority didn't question the reality behind it very much, did it? This will be important in a minute. To a postmodern, the notion is whatever. Doesn't matter anyway. I'm going to explain that in just a second. Well, I'm going to do it now. For a century, the modern project has been to build institutions. It's been a fabulous project, an amazing project. Because of that project, average people have all the services that only the wealthy would have had a century ago. If you got measles a century ago, you died. Now health care is available in the developed world to nearly everybody at some level or another. A century ago, you ate what you grew and what you could scrub from the market. Now you can buy anything you want. Food distribution is an institutional resource. It's an amazing thing. Education. Who got to learn to read a century ago? Who got to go to the university a century ago? We've built these amazing systems to massify education, extend it to everyone. Wonderful things. Amazing technologies we've invented, sometimes out of control, sometimes Frankensteinian, but amazing. Right? Not so for postmoderns. And this is the crux of what I want to talk to you about tonight. I have to do it with a story. A couple of you heard this story before. When we moved to Orlando in 2000, my oldest daughter was 14. And I was doing a lot of music along with pretending to be a college president and in a couple of bands. And this young man named Tommy took an interest in her. So I took an interest in Tommy. And he was starting to get the little metal bits and stuff. And he wanted to be he thought, a punk rock drummer. So he had the drum kit and he was working on his licks and so on. And to connect with him, I would invite him to sit in with a band. Come play with us, you know. Please take the skull and crossbones off the kick, but come play with us. He would play. We got to be friends. And over time, I kind of became the male authority figure outside the family for Tommy, which meant his parents would call me from time to time, and I would talk them off the ledge. See how that works? So Tommy had these issues from time to time. Well, he's about 17. He's a high school junior, maybe even first semester high school senior. I get this frantic call from his parents. You got to talk to Tommy. Something's going on. I said, what? Something's going on. It's weird. I said, what's going on? Well, he's getting all this mail, loads and loads and loads of mail, fancy mail, every kind of mail imaginable from colleges all over the country. I said, yeah, I know, we do that. No, you don't understand. It's very aggressive, very expensive, and it's boxes and boxes of this stuff. I said, yeah, I know, I understand. We do that. It's called marketing. We have a sanitized name for it. It's called enrollment management. But it's modern marketing techniques. You know about modern marketing? Along about the late 70s, well, really the early 80s, we put several technologies together, especially database technologies. And we were able to change marketing forever from being about brand differentiation. If you smoke, smoke Marlboros. Dun, 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 right? Or if you drink, drink Bud. Dun, 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 dun. You're not that old. That was, old marketing was, if you have this desire, choose us. Beginning in the early 80s, marketing took a complete turn, and its purpose was to know enough about you to get you to do something you didn't even know existed. Right? Very manipulative, very intrusive, and they gang up on you. So you got direct mail and telephone stuff and visual ads and film, and they're coordinated. So they're placing subliminal messages in films that are meant to trigger something that happens when you read the newspaper. I mean, it's very, very manipulative stuff, okay? This generation has grown up with that from day one. And because they watch 18,000 hours of television before they go out of the home at age 18, they've been submerged in it. Okay? So our higher education's version of this is called enrollment management. Okay? So I said, yeah, we do that. It's enrollment management. They said, no, you just don't get it. These are very prestigious institutions, and they're making very aggressive offers of scholarships. Well, now they have my attention. Tommy was a solid C- student at an average high school, and I thought military for sure. Okay? Or maybe he'd come to my college, the local community college, but I didn't see him going to Rice or Duke or Emory, all of whom had offered him scholarships. So next time I'm with him, I said, Tommy, tell me about the stuff you're getting in the mail. He says, yeah, it's cool. Standard length paragraph for Tommy. I said, well, no offense, but why are they sending this stuff to you? He says, I don't know. Maybe it's that check. I said, what check? He said, check mark on my SATs. I thought it'd be fun to be Native American. Oh, now be careful. Follow me closely here. Because you could wander off into the wrong conversation real fast here. Listen carefully. Here's what Tommy knows at a cellular level. Even though he was being aggressively courted by people who used his first name and knew things about him in faux personal communications, he knows that as a person, he means nothing to them. He knows that to all those institutions sending him that mail and making those phone calls and getting him online and sending him view books, that to them, he's just a check mark. He's a quota. He's a unit of consumption. In our world, we call them FTEs because that's how we're funded. And at some level that he couldn't articulate to you, I promise you, he knows that's true. And he's not upset about it. He knows he's being manipulated. It doesn't bother him. He just manipulates back. So somebody calls him on the phone and says, I got this great new cheese straightener you got to have, Tommy. He says, great, I was just wanting a cheese straightener. Oh, somebody at the door, I'll get right back to you. And puts the phone down and walks off. Okay? He just has fun jerking them around back. And sometimes it's serious jerking them around back. Do you understand what I'm telling you? Our generation believed that institutions were capable of corruption and manipulation. And when it happened, we were angry, and we wanted to do something about it. His generation believes the only behavior an institution is capable of is manipulation. It's the most extraordinary skepticism I've ever encountered. It leads to all sorts of interesting questions. Will Tommy give blood? There's a great scene in the first 5 minutes of the film Bruce Almighty. Remember this scene? Where his wife or girlfriend, Jennifer Aniston's, being driven to work by him, and they're having a blood drive. And she says, why don't you come in and donate? It's good for you. He said, ick, no needles in me. And then he says, in a very postmodern way, besides, they got all the blood they need stored away in some freezer somewhere. This is all just a marketing scam. Very postmodern moment, which, by the way, isn't true. You know that. Blood has a short half-life on the shelf. The nation's blood supply is in our veins, and the generation that gave gallons is now in their 80s. All of our blood centers are in deep trouble, and the price of blood has tripled in a decade because it depends on communal stewardship and a trust of the institutions that manage that stewardship. There's an institution in trouble. Now, if you teach fourth grade, or you're an elementary school principal or something like that, you may think, what's that got to do with me? These will be your parents in about 4 years. So the title of the presentation was, how will we serve people who don't believe in our institutions? It's a huge question for us. It's an immense challenge. My professors walk into the classroom with the mantle of moral authority. I sacrificed to be here. I studied many years. I'm the expert. I get the funny hat. I speak from the podium. You should respect that. Show me respect. And when she walks in, the students all think, I wonder what her scam is. Wow. Very interesting. I wonder what our institutions will do with this reality. I think it's really interesting. Let me make a couple of comments about that, and then maybe do another song or two and send you to bed, or wherever you want to go. There's no point in judging one generation against another. Things are as they are. And if you're feeling judgmental about this, just remember, you old folks like me, we made them this way. We told them over and over and over again with authority that their real value in the world was in that magnetic strip. We've told them this in every way possible. Here's what they've come to believe. To us, that's their value. And they're rebelling against that. And God bless them for doing it. We need them to rebel against that reduction of their value in the world. They are not a test score. They are not an FTE. They're not a quota. They're persons. You know, I did this talk, in Canada, and a guy approached me afterwards and says, it's worse in Canada. I said, why? He said, because in Canada we refer to our enrollment as funding units, FUs. Oh, what have we done? So I want to leave you with the problem, but I don't want to leave you feeling burdened with it. There's wonderful stuff down this trail, because in addition to challenges, this generation brings immense gifts. If meaning is important to them, if narrative and story matter, if authentic relationships are at the core of what they care about, I can find common ground there. Even if I view rationality a little differently, I can find common ground there. If what they really want to do is make a difference in the world, I can find common ground with that. They don't have to share all of my motivations for me to find common ground in the ways in which their generation will teach ours. I have 4 children, 24, 19, 12, and 10. The 24-year-old is not postmodern particularly. She's really a modern kid. There's a reason for that, and the reason is that we unplugged our television when she was 7, 6 maybe, and it didn't get plugged in again. So she wasn't in fact steeped in all that stuff. My family's like a kind of an old-time European family. We make our own music, you know, we read to each other, we play board games, we do things like that. And so she grew up in a 19th century kind of home. And she's not very postmodern at all. She gets it. She's digital. I mean, she's a lot of other things. She's probably post-millennial or millennial or whatever that thing means, but she's not postmodern. My 19-year-old stayed out of the house and practically lived with the neighbors almost all of her life. So they all had TV, which is why she stayed over there. Okay? And she was steeped in this. She is totally postmodern. She is a wonderful kid. At 19, she just finished high school last spring. She's made now 6 trips to Haiti on her own. She takes hundreds of pounds of rice, barrels of shoes and T-shirts and tank tops and socks and things, and they distribute them in the mountains of Haiti in a mission there. Now, she will never join a big organization to do anything like that. She'll never join a mission board. She'll never be a part of an institution that does that. But she found a family down there that was helping. And she goes and hangs out with that family and helps. You see the difference? I lead an institution of 70,000 students. If this generation values above all else their personhood, how do I render a personal response to 70,000 unique persons? I mean, the only adequate definition of authentic human service is to render a unique response to the unique human being in front of you. And all of our institutions were organized around rendering a standardized response to persons that we believed we could treat as standard units. It's a great challenge to institutional life. And they brought it to us and said, if you're going to treat me that way, let me show you how I'm going to treat you. So we're laboring now to figure out, how do we give a face to every student, a unique response? Everybody is on some journey. How do I connect with your story? How do I lose interest in the institution's story? This is what kills me about higher education. The more affluent and prestigious the university, the more absorbed it is with its own story. It's all about them. Okay? How do we shed that as meaningless and decide our future is in the story of our students, each of their stories, and connect with their narrative? Isn't that an interesting question? Is that one you're interested in figuring out? Yeah? Well. Okay. So, I'll sing a song about love. And here's the gist of the song. You're going to observe behavior and experience interactions with people of a different generation who are different. And you must not find yourself condemning them. It would be the same mistake that missionaries made in the 19th century when they walked into West Africa and wrecked every culture they ran into. You have to get in on their terms first. We can't be so arrogant as to require them to come to us on our terms anymore. They won't do it. Now, that doesn't mean we can't give them some gifts from our generation. I would love to give the gift of rationality to my 19-year-old. They're going to be watching for our motives. And there's only one that counts, so that's what this one's about. I found a river to an ocean, concrete sky and a stone-cold sea. I came to where the emptiness cracked open. All my fears came pouring through into the fire of my sorrow, but I found my strength in forgiving you. Never even dreamed how far my heart could go. To give this life beyond each death, from this deeper well of trust, to know that when there's nothing left, you will always have what you give. You give to love. In this life, the love you give will be the only lasting treasure. What you give will be what you gain. A world that echoes down too deep to measure. Silver coin rings down that well, and you can never spend too much. A diamond echoes deeper still, you will always have what you give. You give to love.